Howdy, of you delicious people. I'm here today to review a movie called Run, Hide, Fight. So, this movie is kind of a risque or just kind of a dicey subject, but recently I just went in to watch this movie. I went in here blind, and then I'm like, well, maybe this review will help people understand what this movie is, or reasonably just understand why I probably reviewed it, and stuff like that. So, for a lot of people, some people may have think or thought that this could just be one of these kind of movies that is just for real, just shock value, uh, and really has an interesting story of Zoe Hull, which I do eventually enjoy Zoe Hull's journey through the way she does things in this movie. That it seems like the police and the SWAT teams are doing jack crap nothing, to where Zoe herself goes in and tries to protect her fellow people. Cause movies like the Sean Astin movie Toy Soldiers, or even a tiny bit like the Japanese movie Battle Royale, uh, we have a movie here that is based in a school that is about a group of previous students crashing into this school, deciding to go and hold people hostage in this school. Mostly to take all of them, put them all in the cafeteria, and at some points we have Zoe's character who ends up helping some of these students escape or run out. And while that is going on, we end up having live streams being done during this whole thing, and we also have news reports being done outside of the building, which is also going to affect certain parts of this film. And so, going into this movie, it is basically about a group of people being held hostage. It seems like there is to have a vehicle where there is to have a bomb being put together in a van, I guess. What ends up happening in this movie is that these people decide to put together this whole thing. This group of renegade students, or I guess you can call them the bad students, eventually decide to do this on senior prank day, where we just have a lot of people who honestly can't take the word of anybody, because really they just assume maybe it's another senior prank, and that's where there's a bunch of delays going on. Even when one of the students, who is Zoe, is to pull the fire alarm, a lot of the teachers and students don't believe that this is a real, true fire emergency or whatever, because it's probably senior prank day. And so yeah, these kids are kind of getting away with this for a good these bad seeds, or whatever you want to call them, whatever you want to call this group. I guess whenever I'll say the group, I'll probably have to refer to some of them as their actual characters' names, like Tristan, or Kip, or Chris, or Anna. But eventually that'll come up. So, coincidentally, we do have this kind of girl that seems to almost be close to being a Rambo of a person, because we have Zoe, who is to just kind of be set up to us as basically being this girl who is going deer hunting with her father, and she easily just drags this deer who is dead, and that is to be showcased in the beginning of this film, to kind of prep us, to let us know that this is gonna be one of those kinds of films where we have Zoe, who is just the take charge woman that is to just kind of be our hero in this film, kind of like how Sean Astin was in the Toy Soldier movie. So, so with that said, I've kind of teed up this movie like about enough, and here's one scene that I kind of thought was like blatant shock value, and I thought it was awful because of a number of things. Uh, like so that way I can prep people for what goes on in this film. So in one scene, we have one of the bad students who is to be Tristan, who decides to go to one of his previous teachers. Evidently, one of these teachers, or I guess, is I guess blah, blah, is I guess attractive, and so Tristan decides that he wants his teacher to completely remove all of her upper body clothing, which basically means shirt and or bra also. But what eventually ends up happening is right after this moment where she is to kind of reveal herself to this student, all of a sudden we have this anime censor that is to go over this woman's body. And I'm kind of like, I'm sorry, like, you should not have gone into that, like, piece if you're going to censor it afterwards. Like, I get that maybe they're trying to like dwindle down their rating of this movie, but they could have gone into a different cut. Like they could have not shown this woman whatsoever to not have to do the censorship at all, or they could have not done this scene at all. But so they wanted to do something controversial, or they wanted to do something to make people uncomfortable, or they wanted like I just don't quite understand why this scene was put together if censoring it afterwards was the thing they were going to do. Like so they shouldn't have done it at all. Like I honestly felt like they shouldn't have done it at all. They could have really just edited that whole like they shouldn't have done that scene. They could have done the whole entire scene without that part in it, and like I thought that that was just a awful maneuver of this movie to have to censor something, to censor a woman's body. It's like yeah, like that's technically I guess like doing something without a woman's permission because like a gun is being wielded to her, but like then don't do the scene. Don't show the body whatsoever. Like most of the scenes were done from like here up to where like I am, where you can't really see anything. So that's what kind of just bugged the crap out of me. Like, don't do the scene. Like protect this woman's like body basically if you are going to censor it anyways. So that way, like people don't pause it and whatever, because a lot of people probably have the ability of any number of photoshops or whatever. That's what like a lot of anime censor things do afterwards. And like I would have said, like protect this woman. Like don't show her goodies. Don't show her stuff. Like come on. But anyways, like because like that would have been the right move to do. Um. But anyways, so let's. That is a weird having to like segue after also. Good God. But yeah, so like I think it's about that coveted time. Like a lot of people have different kind of things about like, oh, you just wanted to be like the politically correct person. Like, no, like I'm just saying like straight up, like if you're gonna do something in a movie, like and then just like have to censor it later, it's just why? That seems garbage. So let's just go into spoilers of this movie. Either way, people will feel the way they feel about this movie. Um, and a lot of people will probably just say like, "Oh, what you just said there was awful." Like I get it. Like I'm just being honest about the movie. Like really like this feels like a shameful act to have like had some like try to attempt some almost declothing in a film, let's just say. Let's just they could have taken the scene out. Moving on, let's go into it. Let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we need to spoil this movie. So like I said in the very beginning of this, we have both Todd Hull and we have Zoe Hull that are going out and they're going deer hunting. Uh, Todd is to take out his gun and take down this deer, and we have Zoe who's like dragging the deer around and eventually having to end eventually this deer's life. Uh, because I guess the deer is like in pain or whichever because shooting like happens. Anyways, because deer hunting happens. Anyways, so we are to eventually see Jennifer Hull, which is supposedly Zoe's mother, and we are eventually supposed to easily understand where eventually like Zoe's mother, like how she was to have no longer really and truly existed, because Jennifer is to come at Zoe as this imaginary friend that Zoe from time to time is to talk to her, and we consistently see this woman throughout this entire movie popping up in different kind of approaches or different kind of looks, and to just showcase, oh, so this woman might have just died from some illness, quite possibly, and we're just kind of seeing several different kind of stages of her, and like spoilers, eventually, like towards the end of the movie, Jennifer finally moves on because I guess both I guess Zoe has just kind of like been able to finally like cope with her mother's death by having some of the students that she has helped through this moment kind of help her cope through things. So, but Todd and Zoe, like they're having their moment together, they're having their breakfast together, and Todd is like, you know what? Like, do you think that we should both, like, both of us, like, not just you, like, both of us, just like see someone, like, just like talk about it, get it off our chest or whatever? Because eventually, even Todd is to tell Zoe that he even talks to Jennifer also. Hence why, like, he kind of asks her if like they should see someone, and Zoe eventually just puts on Todd's army like fatigues or army jacket, and so Todd is to tell Zoe, it's like, hey, I'll let you go to school if you remove that jacket, like if you just take that off, because you're not in war, like you're not at war right now, like you're just going to school, like just enjoy your day. So Zoe goes off to school regardless, and so Zoe is going through her day. It seems that eventually she's to meet some of her friends. It seems like some of her friends are on their way to maybe having a music career after this whole thing is over, or maybe just a limited music career until like they go on to the next step of their life, which is going to kick them in the butt. Uh, it seems that Lewis is to be driving Zoe to school, and it seems like Lewis has a question for Zoe. It seems he wants to ask her out to the prom and just kind of have fun and go dancing and whatever. It seems like this Lewis guy is to have been like uh, the yearbook guy, and so I guess like we have a moment where both Lewis and Zoe are all of a sudden confronted by these jock, like crappy guys that are all of a sudden like mooning Lewis, Lewis and Zoe with their butts and whatever, just having a good time, giving them the finger and all kinds of stuff. Zoe is kind of telling these kids, like therapeutically, like, you're just mad at your mother, you're just mad at your father, you're just mad at whatever. Like, just to like give them like crap to make them want to like decide to no longer like give either one of these people crap, I guess. Like to just like uh give them some kind of like reason not to do this anymore, but if anything, it just eggs them on more. So Lewis decides just to like just park his car off to the side because eventually he's almost getting like driven off the road. And so Lewis just parks his car, the guys go on, and so Zoe and Lewis go on to go to school, and so eventually like they meet all their friends, and eventually they go on to go to lunch and everything like that. So we get some teachers that are to eventually uh, like kind of do like common experimental things, but there's also some stuff that's going on in like the science lab where they're kind of messing with like certain kind of balloons and stuff like that, like mentioning about hydrogen balloons and stuff like that, and they're kind of popping them with lights and stuff like that, or like with like a match, a small or a long match of things, but like they of course have like didn't probably done this for numerous times. Like, and it's very common stuff that they're doing in this school. It's not something extravagant. But anyways, so we end up finding out that there is a cluster of balloons that are all covered in the teacher's lounge, and one teacher is just to be aggravated because he didn't get his coffee today because there's balloons all over the teacher's lounge. Supposedly Lewis and Zoe were to mention before they were going to school how this is senior prank day, and probably more than likely there's going to be some student that's going to be ordering like food, like pizza or something, like right at when school is to be done, or there's going to be some prank that is going to be going on. Like I've seen like a ton of different like there was, I think MTV had this one show where they were doing like these senior prank day things where a lot of them went horribly wrong, where like we had, I think, one, there was one thing where there was like some peacock who like ran throughout the whole entire school, and like that led like a ton of students to all get arrested, and like there's a lot of just controversial senior pranks that ended up just getting a ton of kids arrested, and it's like, man, what a stupid decision that was. But hey, if it was funny, right? Weirdly. So, uh, so eventually pushing on, so we have these students that are all in the lunchroom, and all of a sudden we just have a van crash through this cafeteria. And so now, like all of these, let's call them the group. Like the bad guys, the bad students, we'll just call them the group. So we have this group who is to eventually start going around the school and start cutting wires and eventually calling up the school to say like, hey, like we have a bunch of people in this cafeteria that we are going to kill, like, so, and they already started doing that already. Like there's some random people once they first got in there that they started shooting down, sadly. uh at one point Zoe was in the bathroom, like during this whole cafeteria time, and eventually Zoe was to almost go out of the bathroom to find another like woman covered in blood coming to her in the bathroom, mentioning how like she was to be shot. So Zoe decides that she's gonna go on the ceiling tiles and kind of remove one of them and try and like skedaddle out of here. Because what eventually ends up happening is like Zoe goes into one part of this school and tries to eventually make it like from like the bathroom to eventually making it just back into the kitchen. And so all of a sudden that leads to have one of the bigger of the group, who is to be Chris, who eventually decides like, well, hey, like I'm gonna go and find this person and like shoot whoever it is. And so one of the lunch ladies and Zoe are in the back. They're kind of hiding together. And so the lunch lady shows herself to this Chris guy, so that way, like, this lunch lady will have to take this bullet for this girl, and this girl will just be able to be, like, protected for who knows how long. So what happens is Tristan is the guy that is kind of orchestrating all this. So what Tristan first does is he ends up calling or having all the people with their cell phones like call their loved ones, and then he asks them, it's like, well, hey, did your parents like say that they were going to call the police after this? And like they're kind of unsure, and like he won't kill any of them like for calling or whatever. He's like, no, go ahead and call, like I want you to call. Then eventually he has all the students in the cafeteria start to live stream. And so whoever has the most like followers, the most viewers, the most whatever, like that's the one guy who is to be Lewis. And so all the other phones are just to be like chucked into like some kind of bucket or whatever. Because who cares? Because like they want the highest amount of views, and they want this to basically go viral, or as viral as it can possibly get. So, coincidentally, that happens to be Lewis just because he is like the yearbook guy. And so, like, that's how he has the highest views. And so now he's going to be the guy that has to forcibly document everything. So, what eventually happens is we have one guy who is to be Kip that is starting to go throughout parts of this school and kind of gather some more students or kill them off, sadly. And but eventually there is a lot of classes that eventually don't even realize what's going on. We have Zoe who ended up trying to pull the fire alarm, but eventually a lot of the students go back into class uh, because they don't know what's really going on. They think it's a senior prank. And what ends up actually happening is we end up having Anna who ends up going and like killing the alarm, like cutting out a lot of cords. And so eventually the head office is to be called about this whole situation via Tristan himself. And so that leads to having all these people just going, well, like, I don't know if this is real or not. I don't know if this is true or not. So we just have to kind of confirm things, which I don't even know how they're doing that because it doesn't seem like they have cameras all around the school or whatever. I guess this would be actually a perfect time to have cameras in the school, right? So, but I guess this school doesn't have this. I know my high school freaking had cameras by the time that I left. That's where I'm like, thank God I'm out of here because like this is getting weird. Like I'm just waiting for freaking metal detectors to be coming in my school. Uh, but I'm pretty sure that that's probably what's going to happen. Like after this whole event happens in the school, and I'm sure a lot of schools are just going, yeah, we're gonna just be like an airport. We're gonna like cameras on, and we're gonna freaking just uh, metal detector, freaking everybody, and it's going to be like an airport. And freaking with all the things that have kind of gone on, whether it's the new normal or whatever, like we might as well just be severely cautious for anything. So, but like that's not their fault. Like there, if anything, like I guess it's like, hey, if you want an education, you also need to just put up with a lot of stuff. Like sadly, I feel bad for like the new age of like school and class and whatever. It's just like, but hey, keep everybody safe. It's great. Keep everyone safe. Make them feel safe when they go into school. But going into this, so what eventually ends up happening is eventually Zoe is to go and first she ends up taking down Anna, and how she ends up doing that is eventually Anna is to make it down this hallway where Zoe is at. And so Anna just starts firing away at Anna and kind of hits her in the leg. And so like Anna opens like forcibly has to open up this locker to try to like dodge all these bullets coming at her. And then eventually like Anna goes from like her locker to eventually rolling her way to this this one room that is to eventually be the teacher's lounge that's full of balloons. So Anna is to start like shooting up the balloons, and all of a sudden we just see Zoe just come flying at Anna and like starting to like try to get the gun out of her hand. And then eventually Zoe does shoot Anna and kill her sadly. And so what eventually happens is as Anna is to be consistently going and trying to like release all these students because she gets out of school and then she breaks into it. She basically breaks a window and is telling this teacher, it's like, hey, like this is going down. Freaking get out of here. Like, get out of this school. And so, like, because we have all these teachers that all of a sudden have these, like, lockdown rules, and some of them are, like, reading them off papers because they have no clue of what they are actually supposed to do, which is just kind of weird to me. But I guess this might have been a substitute teacher for that day, so I guess give him a break. Anyways, uh, so we have Zoe and this one girl who is like the music girl. I don't remember what her name was. Uh, Cora? I want to say it's Cora, but I could be wrong about that. Uh, so Well, we continue to have Zoe see Jennifer doing this, and like she's kind of helping her out. She's like telling her like move, or like hey, like freaking come over here, or like bizarrely her mother is being like her guardian angel through this, just kind of helping her like try to be safe. Uh, and so eventually, what ends up happening is Kip is starting to go around and trying to like open up doors and kind of see who's in parts of these classes to kind of gather people up. So eventually, what ends up happening is Zoe is to be spotted like running through the school, and eventually Kip starts firing at her. And so Zoe has this kind of plan where like she's going to lead this guy into one spot of the school where it's to be like this slip and slide like of a thing where all of a sudden like this guy is to be like slipping and slopping and falling, and then so Zoe ends up going and like taking this guy, like beating him up, and then just kind of like handcuffing him, or the equivalent of handcuffing him to these auditorium seats. And so now we get this sob story of Kip, where he is to mention how like he was pantsed in school, and how like eventually like people for years were torturing him and tormenting him, and like and saying all kinds of words that I guess probably would trigger like him to be just upset about himself and whatever. uh like I'm sure every one of these kids have this sob story. We eventually get to where I think the principal ends up going to Tristan, and I guess Tristan had been in principal's office twice, and Tristan was like, "Well, hey, like you know what? Guess what? Like I went in the principal's office for a purpose, because the first time was to go and steal some key from you, and the second time was to return it back." And so like it seems like this principal was being really rough on Tristan, and so like if we would have actually had that scene and had this teacher actually like saying this stuff to Tristan, because I don't know if I can buy it or not, because maybe like Tristan kind of saw any of these things that this guy was to say and like misconstrued them or whatever, to just be like, well, hey, like to just be like, hey man, like what are you doing with your life, like what are you seeing with your future, like you consistently seeing me is just not going to lead you down a path of like of going anywhere. Like you coming to me is just like me just wanting to have to get rid of you and like expel you and whatever. And I think a lot of like principals just don't want to do that. Like a lot of principals are just like, hey man, like I don't want to have a troubled kid come to like come to me and like be the guy that is like consistently getting fights in my school. Like I want everybody to be happy, but that's not always the way. So anyways, like I just the more you know, like God, I just sound so cheesy right now. I apologize. Uh, so let's talk about what the heck the sheriff is doing, because I guess he's doing a job, right? Sadly enough, in this movie, like we just really butcher anything going outside the school because like we just have to just say like, man, they're doing nothing. But so eventually there is a live stream that kind of confirms that people are getting shot. Also, we have finally one of the security guards, once the principal is to be killed. Eventually, one of the security guards pees himself and has to like change his pants, sadly, and then goes to the head office and just like, hey, people are getting shot here. Like, freaking call it in, lockdown and everything. And so the sheriff office is getting called off, and it seems like these kids were creating all these like wildfires and all these like problems like outside to just kind of like uh cause all these like holding of traffic and everything like that, kind of making it hard to get into this school or whatever, because like they like created all these wildfires and all these things that were to just cause like pandemonium and whatever for the sheriffs and everybody. So because I guess these kids like really just planned the crap out of this for whatever reason. Like you would have thought like what they're doing were like simple enough, but like it seems like it doesn't seem like the number of people that were doing this seems like a rational number to accomplish all this. But that's just me. I don't know. What do I know? Uh, so eventually we push on. So supposedly Lewis is to find out that there's explosives rigged into this van. And in all honesty, like the actual explosives that go into this van is just kind of like, why did they even need to do that? Like, it just seemed like honestly just so flimsy. And when eventually, like, what ends up happening is that Zoe needs to basically pull like the Van Damme thing that happens in Sudden Death, where eventually Tristan is to like start calling for Kip and start calling for Anna, and like so no one is on the phone. And so Tristan is like, well, is this our guardian angel that is coming and like protecting some of these students? And like you would probably think, because there's a lot of like football coaches, or there's a lot of like uh there's a lot of teachers and whatever that used to be like ex-military or whatever. You would have thought that like the obvious role would have been just like, yeah, let's have an ex-military guy like come in here and like save all these kids. But instead, we just have like some student that I just has like Leonard Liam Neeson like skills that she's been like buffering through time. So uh so eventually Zoe needs to go to Tristan and just kind of like to like show herself, or people are going to start to get killed in this cafeteria. And so Zoe goes for like the last like people and tell them like get the heck out of here. Um, but we also eventually have Zoe who's to try to get word out to the sheriff that because eventually Cora is to call Zoe and tell the sheriff like, hey, like get the cameras away from the school so that way we can start releasing like students out and these bad guys won't know. And we have the sheriff who ends up getting on the line with Tristan to just kind of talk things out. And like Tristan is kind of like mentioning how like the sheriff is kind of like a sad sack of a sheriff in all honesty, and that like he's kind of lost his step or whatever, that like his life hasn't gone right for him. And but like the sheriff is just really keeping Tristan busy, and like so like the sheriff isn't really again doing much but what like Zoe is kind of saying. And you would have thought like at some point like the SWAT team would have came in and just taken these people out. But like towards the very tail end of the movie, that's what this SWAT team eventually finally decides to do. They end up going into one part of the school and starting to just like like zip tie every single student, not knowing who's the bad guy or who's the good guy, so they just zip tie everybody. So, but yeah, so there's also explosions that were set up via this school with certain backpacks that were kind of placed strategically in certain locations. And eventually, we have the head office who ends up getting a bomb detonation. And so eventually, like, Zoe was in the midst of that, but eventually she just falls onto the ground to just pretend like she's dead. To where eventually Anna, who is still alive, is kind of just crushing this girl's hand. So, and that's eventually when, like, Zoe decides to go after Anna. So, but anyways, pushing on. So what eventually ends up happening is Zoe goes to confront Tristan, and really what eventually ends up happening is kind of like Zoe is calling Tristan out, like via this live stream, because eventually Zoe is to take the live stream from Lewis, who ended up getting shot, and like Zoe's telling Lewis, it's like, you're me and you are gonna go to the prom together. It's like tell me whatever you want to tell me at prom. So so we never really confirm whether or not Lewis is to be dead. We also have Lewis who's like mentioning that he's cold, which is probably mean that he's gonna die sometime soon. Because that's what always happens when people die in a movie. They say, "Oh, I'm cold," so that means you're gonna die soon. Sadly, um, but yeah. So let's quickly just go over the whole like Tristan thing, because it kind of like shows how menacing this person is. This whole like Tristan eventually goes into this Spanish class and is to like mention how he used to go to the Spanish class and how he only wants to talk Spanish to this Spanish teacher. And so eventually he like wants to show his power, and how basically uh him having a gun in him having a gun in his hand is to like seemingly have like a hammer, and all he sees is nails, and nails are all like people, sadly enough. So Tristan is to have this teacher take off her like complete upper bodied clothes, and then eventually this woman like kind of just covers back up, but we still have that anime censor of the white clouded whatever thing to just like, they should have just cut it. They should have just cut that out. Good God, just remove the. You could have just teased it. I would have been okay with that. Like that was just awful. But I don't want to complain about it twice. So, because I just think that it was just in poor taste to do that scene whatsoever. Like with a movie that was already just kind of like dicey for people. But whatever, it is what it is. So, uh, but yeah, so eventually they start getting more students in the cafeteria, and eventually this just leads to eventually the big guy who is to uh, be Chris heading off to go and find Zoe, because Zoe's not just going to easily give herself up. So we also have Thomas Jane in this movie, Todd, who's to eventually go on and try to like sneak under some vehicle and go and like try to like sniper and try to find out if he can kill any number of these students to help out these people, because it seems like the sheriffs or anybody aren't doing anything because they just don't know what to do, or it's taking too long for certain people to be called up, or whatever the heck reason. So so we have Todd himself that is kind of trying to sniper through this cafeteria room and try to take down these guys, but eventually he can't get a clear shot because people are moving too much. So coincidentally, we also have Todd, who seemingly has a point of view of every single thing in this entire school also. Because eventually what ends up happening is Zoe is to go into this science lab, and Chris is to eventually follow her in there, and he is to talk crazy talk. And so Zoe is to like to open up all these gasoline valves, because that happens a lot of time in these science rooms where there's like a specific thing for gas. So uh, what ends up happening is that uh, Zoe is to start like lighting parts of like the gas valves that end up kind of freaking out Chris. Chris eventually goes to almost shoot Zoe, and Zoe kind of tells him about the symbols or the signals or whatever that the things in his head are like talking about. We have Zoe who's like, "Yeah, I know the symbols too. I know what they are." And Chris is like, "I'm not falling for that." And all of a sudden, we have Todd who comes on in and shoots via this window to kill Chris, sadly. And then all of a sudden, we have Zoe who is to look out the window to find her father there, and he's just like, yeah, like I helped out a bit, like, but Zoe did a lot of the work. So all of a sudden after that, we find out, like, I guess the SWAT team had made it there, and so Todd is all of a sudden getting like, hey man, like, put it down, like, put your weapon down. And so like Todd ends up getting arrested for like helping out technically. But like, so maybe he'll be sheriff in the sequel this movie if there ever is one. I hope not, because what the heck are they going to do? Like, I hope there's not another shooting movie. That would be awful. Uh, like, I'm trying to think that there's going to be a sequel to this movie. That seems an odd thing to do or say or whatever. But anyways, so it seems like pretty much everybody have been taken and dismantled and whatever. So that just leads to now Zoe confronting Tristan. Because eventually, what ends up happening is Tristan or Zoe like uncuffs Kip and has Kip kind of confront both Chris and Tristan, and that leads for Tristan to get shot. That eventually leads to Chris running after Zoe, and like that also leads sadly for Kip to get shot. Also, he gets shot up pretty badly. When Kip is to go into the cafeteria, we have Todd who's looking on. Is like, who the heck is this guy? And so, but yeah, of course, like what ends up happening is Tristan ends up setting up the bomb, and so now we have like Zoe and Tristan that are kind of running around and kind of bantering back and forth on one another because I guess this live stream has now hit the TV, and so now we have like Tristan talking to Zoe via like on TV, and so like because they have these like apps that are technically walkie talkies, which is just weird. So uh so we have this dialogue back and forth going between the two of them, and so what eventually ends up happening is they end up setting off this bomb in this van, and Tristan runs off so that way he can go and take somebody that like looks like his same height and whatever, and like try to like change clothes with this guy and kill him off so badly to where it looks like him. And so this guy ends up swapping clothes with this guy and tries to run out of the school like he is like not one of the bad guys. Like this is kind of like we're getting into heavy amounts of sudden death territory with the Jean-Claude film, where I'm just like, man, this is a lot of shades of like sudden death. Like I think they ended up copying and pasting a lot of that, or they just thought like, ooh, wouldn't it be smart to just do this? Because these students have to, or this group of people have to be so clever. So, uh, so eventually, Zoe is to cleverly, like remove all of these cafeteria tables to back this car or this van into this parking lot, to where this parking lot just like has his car like explode, but man, does it feel like a wussy kind of explosion. Where I'm just like, wait a minute. I'm like, that was to have the explosion that we were supposed to worry about, like the numerous barrels in the van, and like that just looks really weak. Like I guess they just kind of figured, well, like once we get into a building, it'll probably just erupt the building and fire up the building and whatever, and so that will be the horrific scene. But like to me, that just explosion just seemed really weak. I've seen too many like movie explosional things, and I just thought, I was like, man, that looks cheap. So, and I was like, that also seems like a horrible thing to say. Anyways, so uh, eventually, what ends up happening is like everyone ends up getting like plastic, or what is it? What's the word? Like they get kind of goofy handcuffed, and so we end up having the sheriff who ends up talking to Zoe, and he ends up like cutting her little handcuffy things, and like just saying like, hey, like I wanted to like break you free from your handcuffs to shake your hand, because like you're the one that helped us out through this whole thing. Like thank God for you, Rambo or Jean Claude. Like because like we were just like, what could we do? Like just wait for SWAT to come in here, and by that time there's a million people that are gonna freaking be dead. Uh, Especially during that time where like Tristan was just killing people every 5 so on minutes. But I guess like she probably saved a ton of people in the process. So bravo for her. But here's the thing. So uh, Zoe is talking to her father, and so her father mentions that he speaks to their mother every once in a while. And so all of a sudden, Zoe has this like thought about her. It's like, well, hey, like, do you still have your gun just kind of like packed away somewhere? Because like I have this suspicion about something. And so cleverly, uh, Zoe is to eventually find her father's gun. And you would think like Zoe like going and finding this gun would immediately get her arrested, but I guess not. So, because I guess conveniently it's back where it was. So, like, in I guess just having a gun just lying around wherever. Like, I guess it's just like, dude, this is like the worst thing to do in a movie, but whatever. So, it's just convenient writing. So Zoe goes and finds this gun and goes to where Tristan is, who I guess she conveniently figured out that Tristan was going to be at some bridge. And so we just see like Tristan who's opening up this box full of stack of cash. And so Zoe ends up shooting Tristan, knocking him down. And so what ends up happening is Tristan ends up taking this big rock, like she kind of did with the deer at the beginning of this movie, to kind of crush the deer's head to kill it off, sadly. Zoe takes this rock and is going to crush Tristan's head, but instead she ends up purposely missing and just like, well, I guess not. I guess I'm not going to kill you off. So you're just gonna have to just sit here until police come. Like they're coming for you. Like believe me. To just be like, yeah, like you were the whole like person behind all this. You were the one who orchestrated all this, and then you're gonna go to prison forever. So, with that said, yeah, I think that's all that I wanted to say about this movie. I don't think there was much of like. I think this movie just kind of wraps up after that. I'm sure probably for this school, nobody's ever going to do a senior prank ever again, because of what had happened during this day. But anyways, I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.